A lot of people say that your camera is not the thing that's going to make the biggest difference, it's the glass that you put in front of it. So I thought, let's just eliminate the glass. Today, let's stick this plastic lens from a Lomo Diana onto the Pyxis and see how that looks. Okay, you have watched the stinger. I don't know how this turned out yet. This is Dale before he's gone out to do the shoot and seen what the results are. I've obviously stuck this on and I've had a mess around with it, but I haven't played with it yet, so I've just got my assumptions. My assumptions are, variously, it's gonna be kind of funky, and whether the funky is good funky or bad funky is up for interpretation, shall we say. I'll let you on the secret. My videos, I normally script them out in some way, shape or form and have a little teleprompter, but this is not scripted. This is just me having a bit of a crazy thought. Someone I know, a guy called Jack, who's a musician, he's really cool, also is a little bit of a camera pervert now. He didn't used to be, and he gradually got sucked into the things. And Jack sent me a message over the weekend and said, have you tried one of these? And it was like a sort of lens cap lens. So they take a disposable camera lens, they stick it into like a lens cap, and then you could just have it as a tiny little thing on your camera. And he was quite enamored with the idea of getting hold of one and having a play with it. And I said, well, no, I haven't done that, but I did mess around with Lomo stuff a lot. And I do have a load of plastic lenses that are EF mountable. This has an EF mount. So maybe let's have a play with that. What's going on? What is this? Lomo, which is kind of where this is from, or this version of this is from, their thing was imperfect images on film and just making cameras that do funky things. So a way back, I had a load of different Lomo cameras, like a sprocket rocket, so you could expose all the way to the sprocket. I had a spinner, which was kind of funky. It looked like you were kind of this archer just shooting everyone around you, because every time you did it, you always ended up in that pose. And I also had the Diana camera, which was a medium format camera, taking those 120 rolls of film. It, at 20mm, is wide. You can focus it. Just have a listen to this. Oh yeah, quality. That is just plastic rubbing against plastic. You know, it squeaks sometimes. Sometimes you end up pulling the whole lens off because it undoes itself. It is not a precise tool. The downside of this lens, clearly, is that it's going to be kind of hard to focus and you can't control the aperture. It's not going to deal, I don't think, with highlights particularly well and like light hitting the lens because it is plastic, which is kind of crap. I'm not going to be able to control how much light is getting in through the aperture. I'm going to be aiming to shoot at dusk at night and therefore have a darker palette to start with, where we have like cars in the background, headlights flaring into the lens. How does it all look? We're going to find out. Let's cut to the shoot. So we're a few days on from the shoot. I've had a chance to come home, pull the footage in, have a little bit of play with it. We got one of his tracks and just laid that underneath. Music video visualizer, but very straightforward, very simple. The whole thing we set up on this sort of overpass where you can look down dual carriageway, and I very carefully lit it using the Duan C100, which has a grid on it so that we could position the light. I was kind of doing this weird, funky, like uplighting thing, just sort of holding it just out of shot, so that it wasn't going to be dazzling or distracting, so the drivers, because it's gridded, wouldn't be able to see it at all pointing upwards. So that was our kind of concession to making sure that we weren't being distracting. always very important. Of course, because it was just two of us, I couldn't get tons of BTS, so I just took a couple of shots of the camera and that kind of thing, but not really much of the actual performances and things. But essentially, you know, the lens worked. But something that I knew, but obviously is a little bit of a pain, is the fixed aperture on it, and that's a fairly small fixed aperture, so it's not a low light lens at all. We started when there was still some light in the sky. By the time we actually got to the takes that were working, it was way down. You know, it was basically completely dark where we were, so that light became really important. And if it wasn't for the car headlights in the background, I don't think we would have really got anything worthwhile. And I was at 3,200 on the Pyxis for this. This lens, actually, here's the interesting part of it. It is a lens for a medium format camera. So even in this sense, the Pyxis is only full frame. You know, we get all those people who are a little bit snobby about, oh, you know, full frame's better, you know, than crop sensors, APS-C, Super 35 to the non-heathens. So that's interesting, because we're then stepping up beyond Super 35, beyond full frame, to medium format, you know, like an IMAX camera, like an Alexa 65, and then even then you have the like the wet plate camera people who are there looking down on the medium format people. So it's all relative, but the point is, this is a 20mm lens, and on a medium format camera, 20mm is going to, because the image circle that the lens is projecting is bigger than what the full frame sensor can viably use, this is going to feel even wider on medium format. What I'd always found with this, because I'd always been using it on Super 35mm sensors, was it was a little bit too tight, and the imperfections of the plastic and the out of focusness and all of that kind of stuff just got compounded. It was just not quite there. But now on the Pyxis, you know, it actually had something about it. The lens, because this is meant to be a fisheye, this is meant to be a fisheye lens. It is not meant to be a 20mm rectilinear, you know, perfect lens. It's meant to have some warping to it. And I started to see that because we're on that Pyxis sensor, and you can't really make it out in the shot, but the rail, the guardrail on the overpass was bowing backwards. So you are starting to get that pronounced fisheye effect in the image, and it really, because we had Jack very close to the camera, it really started to feel like he was getting pulled in a little bit to the center. Going into this and trying to mess up the nice image that the Pyxis is capable of delivering gave me a little bit of license to just be crazy with it and just see where it went. And that license to just experiment and mess around and make things work led me to shoot this mostly at 360-degree shutter for the performance shots, which maybe I wouldn't normally do for a master performance shot, but I wanted to have just a little bit more light, and the 360-degree shutter gave me that. I could boost up the level on Jack, no problem, with the GNC 100, but I wanted more out of the background and the sky and everything else. So 360-degree shutter got me another stop of light, and it changes the aesthetic. After we finish up at the overpass here, we drove to the next location, and while we're doing that, I took the frame rate from 24 frames a second to 12 frames a second and kept that 360-degree shutter. So here, where Jack was just shooting some little bits like as we were driving along, we're getting lots of really blurry, motiony kind of car headlights and my hands driving and all of that kind of stuff. That's because it's 360-degree shutter at 12 frames a second, so it's really long shutter for motion picture. You know, it's a long shutter. It's not dragging it like on a time lapse where you can have it open for a second or 2 or 3 or 30, but it definitely gives it a very different look. And we actually carried this forward to the performance shot where Jack is performing, I'm moving, he gets slightly blurry. If he moves too much, I get him blurry and the background blurry if I move too much, and that has a texture and a quality to it. None of these things are just because of the lens, but because the lens was a slow lens, I chose to get more light by going to 360-degree. I liked the aesthetic. Sometimes it's a thing that I do anyway, but here it just let me lean on something that I wouldn't normally lean on, which is fun, and it was creative, and it was exciting to see how it worked out and have a bit of an experiment with it, and then work out when he's performing, you know, how I need to move, how he needs to move to get the best effect. So there are lots of things at the point of capture that I'm doing to affect the quality of the visual. I'm putting this lens on, it's got a slightly fisheye effect. It has a plastic element, so it doesn't do too well with a lot of things that normal lenses we take for granted how well they're going to render an image. I'm dragging the shutter, I'm shooting at lower frame rates, and then that is leading me down a certain path. Got it back and I started playing with it. I found that even though this has some character and, you know, it looks a certain way, I wanted it to be more characterful. So I started to slap on a few different effects, you know, halation, and I even experimented with like a VHS video kind of texture over the top of it. All of those things were cool. I ended up really just going with halation and kind of really leaning into that side of it and a little bit of blooming. And I think that worked really nicely. You could do that with any lens, and you could do this kind of effect over the top of a much more pristine lens, and maybe it would make your life easier when shooting it. And that is maybe the point of this whole video. If you are using a camera, you're trying to capture an image and you're trying to say something with the image, and that doesn't always have to be a perfect, pristine image. So when you're setting things up, don't be afraid of the artistic things, don't be afraid of the slightly out of focus, the slightly weird, the slightly distorted, because that's where you can really set your images apart and impart some kind of character to it. And I think that then showing this to Jack afterwards, he was really thrilled with how it came out. It felt a certain way, it felt like a vibe, you know, the red light with the distortion, with the kind of imperfect focus and the way that everything was sitting. It actually, for him and for what he's gonna maybe use it for, it works really, really well. I'm leaving some links to Jack's music in the description down below, so make sure you check those out as well. Do I recommend everyone goes out and buys a plastic lens for their Pyxis? No, probably not. If you happen to have one, definitely have an experiment with it. If you know someone who is selling some cheap, maybe pick it up and have a bit of a play. With this kind of lens, you are just opening yourself up to the possibility of things being a little bit not perfect. And once you lean into that and you just affect the other things that you can affect, you're, even with the lighting, I wouldn't have necessarily uplit someone like this if I was going for a beautiful looking music video. I might have taken a bigger light source, I might have lit them from above, you know, just made it moody that way. But here, because I just decided let's go out and shoot this, let's shoot on this overpass, let's try and be safe, let's grid off the light. Oh, we shouldn't be pointing it down then because it's going to get into people's eyes. Let's point it up and that way no one will be able to see it at all. All of those imperfect decisions that are about the scenario that we're in have led to the look, including the lens, including the way it's lit, and just the free-flowing experimentation. That is the point of this. Plastic Pyxis is, maybe it is a vibe, I don't know. It is not something I'm going to do loads of, I don't think, because I have plenty of other lenses that have character and there are other ways of getting character. But for that odd occasion, when I need something a little bit different and I need to frame something for a client or artist that I'm working with and say, well, if we use this, it's going to be, in some respects, objectively bad. Are you happy to lean into that? And if they are, it gives you license then to not worry about the image quality and just worry about the image that you're capturing. I hope it's been interesting. Drop any questions you've got down below. Happy to engage in some discussion down there. Yeah, and let me know if you shoot anything with a plastic lens and how it comes out on your Pyxis or otherwise.